How is it that blockchain could bring control and privacy to our data? Well, I'd like to explore the concept of a data room in a series of videos, this being the first, because this concept has really helped me think about the possibilities behind blockchain and how it might work to help us manage our data. First, I'd like you to think about the kinds of data that it's important to you to maintain privacy around. I'm talking about salary data, medical information, DNA data, password data, bank information, things like that. And there's this paradox with private data that oftentimes the data that you most want to keep private is also the data that would have the greatest value to society if you did share it. So if you're altruistic, it's the data you most want to share and the data that you most want to keep private at the same time. Let me show you what I mean. Take medical records, for example. Obviously, you don't want information about your mental health and about your STDs to be shared with the whole world. And you also don't want cancers and heart conditions to be known to potential employers. But if researchers could have access to everyone's medical records, they could use artificial intelligence to do a deep dive into that data to recognize patterns that doctors could never detect if they only see 20 patients a day. So there's this tension between privacy for sensitive data and the value that society could gain if we gave this same data to artificial intelligence to do good things with. And it's similar with self-driving car data. Companies that are trying to develop these self-driving cars, they need a ton of data about how people drive and what happens in different situations on the road. They need to be able to predict when a car might hit you and how to avoid making that happen. And to do that, they need a lot of information about people's driving habits and people's driving quirks. But if these companies had that data, they'd know a lot of information about just how you live your life and all the places you go in a given week. So it's sensitive data that also has the potential to make the world a safer place if you're willing to give it up. So how do we solve this paradox? Well, as you might expect based on this video series, I'm going to suggest that blockchain has something to offer us. It's not going to happen immediately because of issues that I'll explain a little bit more in other videos, particularly videos relating to governance. But the fact that blockchain could help us solve this is actually kind of mind-blowing if you think about it. So how do we start to think about this? Well, we imagine gathering up all of our data into a data box like this, and we put that data into an empty data room with a good solid lock. And the most important thing about this room is the sign on the door that says no humans allowed. And then you get to write up your own rules about your data. You can say anyone can use my data if they pay me $50 first. Or maybe anyone can use my data if they have a PhD in bioengineering and are doing not-for-profit medical research. Or else anyone can use my data who's passed an ethical training course and pays me $10 can use my data. And it's also possible for other people to put their data in that room, and each person's data, of course, is going to have its own padlock. And other people can put their own rules on their data, and those don't have to be the same as your rules. Why should everybody's rules be the same when we all have different values and priorities? We also know that something magical happens when data gets together in the same room. Because quite frankly, your data alone is not very valuable. But when you cluster it with other people's data, artificial intelligence just loves that. It doesn't like single data points, it likes gobs and gobs of data. Wait a second. If everybody's data has its own padlock on it, does it even matter that all that data is in the same room? Well, we're going to gather up everybody's keys to their data box and also the key to the room and give them to a trustworthy robot. So the black box here is the data room we've been talking about, and the robot is the one we trust with the keys. And there's broad consensus among the blockchain community that the robot will look a little bit like Rosie, the robot made from the Jetsons. But she failed the job interview for personality reasons, so Rob the robot got the job instead. And why did he get the job? He's trustworthy, and he's obedient, and he has a really good memory. He can go into that data room and memorize every single rule that every single person has put onto their data. It's like a photographic memory, I'm not even kidding. If I write up a rule about how my data can and cannot be used, I trust Rob the robot. He does not betray people. Even if they offend him, he just doesn't betray them. So how does this relate to blockchain? Well, we have two parts to this. There's the data room, and then there's the robot's brain. The data room itself may or may not be on a blockchain. But for now, if it's super sensitive data, it's probably not on a public blockchain. The data room could either be a database or a private blockchain, and some people call private blockchains permissioned blockchains. Sometime in the future, this data room could be a public encrypted blockchain, but we're still figuring blockchain out for right now, and most people are not willing to be guinea pigs with their most sensitive information. So what about the robot's brain? Is that on a blockchain? Actually, yes it is. It can be and probably should be on a blockchain. I kind of imagine that Rob the robot has this slit in his chest and it just spits out reams and reams of paper, spilling his guts with everything on his heart and mind. And by that, we mean the list of rules that he's forced to memorize about what can and cannot be done with every single individual person's data. This list can be spit out publicly for everybody to see if it's on a public blockchain. Because remember, blockchains are public, immutable, global ledgers. And this could either be a public or a private blockchain. It could either be encrypted or not. But since we're trying to make things visualizable and easy to think about here, let's just imagine it's public and unencrypted. So the whole world can see all of your rules. They can look at it and see, oh, I can access your data if I pay you $50 and have a medical degree. Having it so public would make it pretty easy to sue people if they violated any of your data rules. I mean, Rob the robot would never violate one of your rules, but it's still possible for something shady to go down after it leaves the robot's hands. For example, if you allow the robot to photocopy your data and give it to someone, then that person could sell it to someone sketchy behind your back. And I'm just saying it would be easy to sue the person who sold your data behind your back if there's a rule you had on a public blockchain saying you don't allow that. Of course, if it freaks you out to think of Rob the robot photocopying your data and giving it to people, you can just put a rule on your data that says no photocopying allowed. But, well, this topic is complex enough that I'd like to devote an entire another video on how Rob the robot manages your data and maintains your privacy or not. Because it gets into things like zero-knowledge proofs and other really cool things to think about. So subscribe if you're still curious.